Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, we're discussing the implications of ECOWAS's lifting of sanctions on Niger and others. And I've been speaking with Ambassador Elijah Onyawa, is the former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi. Ambassador, thank you so much for staying with Politics Tonight. Let's talk about the significant repercussions of their withdrawal from ECOWAS on the stability of the region. What can you say about it?
It's a big concern. When you have a 15-member nations, coming together to form a regional bloc, and all of a sudden you're down to 12. That is not a very good thing for the region at all. Over the years, what the region have always been, what the regional body have been trying to do is to ensure that there is cohesion and unity amongst the member states. So when you have three very important nations, pulling out of that, of that alliance, then we have a problem. The problems are many. Businesses are going to suffer. Movement of people. For example, Nigerians that live in these three countries, how are they going to be seen? No flight zone. If you have a flight, commercial flights that fly in the airspace of Niger into Nigeria, that means they have to now find another route. Journeys that you would have made in a very, short period of time would be elongated as a result of that. So clearly there is no gainsaying the fact that it's a big challenge if we have these three countries pull out of, even for them as a country as well. The citizens of their country are going to suffer massively as a result of that decision as well. And when you even have a confederation, initially there were three countries, and right now they said that it's AOSS, alliance of, the Sahel states. What you're also going to find is that there is going to be one president as well. So some of the things that they envisaged that actually prompted them to take that decision may actually be, they may have taken that decision too hasty as well. So there are challenges. Without a doubt, the international passports are going to be changed. For you to come from Burkina Faso to the regional bloc again, there will be a lot of changes in the protocol and all of the movement and all of these issues as well. Remember, within the region, you can move into any country. Movement of goods and services within the West African region is free. You can do that at will. I can leave Nigeria now and get into Ghana without any visa restriction, without anybody telling me, have you come with A or have you come with B? So this freedom of movement and all of these challenges are the things that are posing a problem, for the region. There are also security concerns as well, because you can't just tell if you're sharing borders with any of the countries what is going to happen. We know the challenge we have within the northeastern part of the country, as well as, some other parts of the country as well that are bordered with the nations, in question. So clearly, it's important that within the region that ECOWAS sits down with these people and find a good way of addressing these challenges. Like I said, the problems are there. The challenges is the fact that they feel that they were betrayed, and they feel that it was external pressure, from other countries that are forcing ECOWAS to get them to return power to democracy. But clearly, there must always be, whenever there is a junta in process, as much as people can, get to the streets and demonstrate that this is what they are looking for. With time, these things are momentary. With time, they will also find out that this is not exactly what they thought they were expecting. So without a doubt, the window for conversation is there. The window for resolution of the impasse is there. So I think that ECOWAS will be weaker without these three countries. But I know that at this point in time, all the options are open for negotiation, and I believe that at some point there will be some kind of resolution.
Ambassador, you've called this a win-win situation for both parties. You've also said this is a step in the right direction for ECOWAS and also the soft landing. But we must also remember that none of the demands by ECOWAS have been met. To remind us, one demand by ECOWAS is immediate restoration of constitutional order. But the junta said they would hand over after 3 years. These member states also announced the formation of a military bloc known as the Alliance of Sahel States, which you have talked about. Many people have called this a direct result of their exit from ECOWAS. What does this mean for ECOWAS? 2, ECOWAS is urging member states to reconsider their decision in view of the benefits enjoyed by their decision. What kind of conversation can make these member states come back to ECOWAS?
Well, there are a lot on the table at the moment for discussion. There's a lot of benefits for those countries under this setting. What are the benefits? Excuse me, please. The benefits is that they have freedom of movement. The benefit is that they import their goods through all of the nations that have water bodies within the region. So if they are pulling out, I think the point for ECOWAS at this material time is to sit down with them and let them see the advantages of their coming back to the Union. There were financial sanctions that were imposed on them. We had travel restrictions. And in addition to all of these things, the families of the juntas were also not allowed to move from, to travel within the region as well. So all of these sanctions that were imposed on them became a problem for them already. And clearly, the Ramadan is about to start, and the Christians are already involved with the Lenten season. And what is clear in that conversation was the fact that the humanitarian factor was paramount in ECOWAS making their decision. Because sanctions are not just for wood, they are for individuals. And the people that are suffering it are the ordinary citizens. As much as we want to get the juntas to come to the table to talk, if there are sanctions, people of the countries that are unable to trade, if they want to do financial transactions, their transactions cannot go through just on the account of the fact that there are juntas in the country. So clearly, the hardship imposed by the sanctions will be borne largely by the citizens of these three countries. So what has happened is that once the sanctions have been lifted, it means that it is, business as usual. What was existing before now will now go back to that same situation where they can do their financial transactions, where we can fly to, from one country to the other without having any kind of, controls and all of that. So I believe that these countries will look at it and then see what benefits there are, or, that the Commission, provides for them. On the other hand, I'm also certain that ECOWAS on their own part will try to also do whatever they need to do to be able to convince them, because it's now a convincing game. And not just that, the people also, I think both blocs need themselves. ECOWAS need them, and these guys also need ECOWAS. Because I don't know where Niger Republic needs to be able to get light from. I don't know where some of these other countries that do their importation through these Senegal, Dakar, and some of these Togo, Lomé, and some of these countries. How do they intend to bring things into the country? Or do they intend to be flying anything they have? Or they, to be flying goods and services, via aeroplane transportation only? So it will take some time, I understand. These decisions were not made overnight. So I think it will take some time, but there will be adjustments at some point.
So talking about Niger, looking at the economic sanctions lifted, it looks like Niger had more to lose than other member states. How would this decision make life easier for the ordinary people in Niger?
It's a bit of that's what I'm talking about. Because if you get to the border of Borno State, even up to Jigawa, these people have they have a lot in common. They are people, they are married to one another. There are people, some Nigerians that have their uncles in Niger and vice versa. In fact, it will surprise you, but even communication, the language of communication, I'm sure you know that the president, even the head of state right now, that is a military junta, speaks Hausa. They understand themselves very well. They speak in the same language. So these are the ties that I believe that, even for Niger specifically, it's not going to augur well for the citizens of Niger Republic if they go ahead with that decision. And that's why I believe that, with time, they will think through, review what has happened. Everybody will see where they have made mistakes. And I believe that, the countries will find out that there are more economic opportunities and potentials, staying within the regional bloc than just staying on their own. I believe that those factors are there for them to see. I understand the challenge, which is the fact that, they felt that ECOWAS should have stood for them, that their people actually wanted the junta because they were celebrating celebrations all over the streets of the country when that happened. They also talking about the fact that they've been oppressed by these external forces over time. Yes, we understand all of that, but what ECOWAS is saying is that whatever your issues are, there must be a democratically, acceptable way of expressing those concerns. And there must also be a way you can deal with that without necessarily having to bring the military in to take over power to do all of that.
But does it bother you that perhaps sanctions may not be enough in dissuading coup plotters and ultimately stopping the spread of military intervention in West Africa?
Yes, it does. It does, because the challenge is that if we are unable to resolve this impasse, what it means is that there are also chances that more and more countries are likely to go that way. We had it in Guinea. Before that happened in Niger and Burkina Faso and then Mali. Mali has always, been there, even well before these other three. But obviously, a situation where you have 15 member states and 4 are, governed by the junta, that's a big concern, And I believe that it also calls for responsibility from African leaders as well. A situation where people are staying too long without necessarily, trying to find ways of amending the constitution to be able to, have themselves stay in power for as long as possible. We had a situation with Senegal over the last 1 month or thereabouts, where the president, Macky Sall, went ahead and extended, the elections up until December, whereas his tenure is officially expected to come to an end sometime in April this year. I think the elections was supposed to take place in last week, 25th of February, and so on and so forth. He had to take the constitutional court of the land to make a decision in that regard to say that the attempt to postpone the election is illegal. So clearly, it's a call to action for the regional leaders to say we cannot continue to do what is unconstitutional. That's even the first issue, So that's the border. The border is that if this is allowed to fester, then there are challenges, there are possibilities that this can actually extend and go and meet other member states, So clearly, it's a border for everyone that is watching, and that's why I think that the responsible thing to do is to call everybody to a table and try and find a way to resolve the problem. And I believe that my honest, my earnest hope is that this matter we should be resolved between the two warring factions. They need to come together. The challenge at this point in time is that we are awaiting their response, but clearly it seems there's quite a lot of hurdles yet to cross. But I think that there should be, the moment this engagement begins to happen, clearly there are also some conditions that were laid out by ECOWAS that hasn't been fulfilled by the parties, because I understand that there were conditions like releasing someone like President Bazoum and his family and all of that. So we await their response, and by the time their response comes up, I believe that ECOWAS will also look at it and then decide on what the next line of action should be. But I think that it has to be a long negotiation. It will be a long road to walk, but all the parties, I believe, must be ready to come to a table and find a way to move forward.
I mean, for a fact, these sanctions were meant to serve as a deterrent to soldiers in other countries in the sub-region. So, Ambassador, if sanctions would work, what other measures can be used?
Well, at this point in time, I don't even think that there are sanctions anymore. All the sanctions have been lifted, and I believe that what is available right now is diplomatic solution. The decision to impose the sanction didn't all go well, with the people who've sanctioned. And I believe that there were a lot of pressure for ECOWAS to reconsider their position. So I think that the only way out of this is diplomatic solution. And I think that as both parties continue to engage, it's clear that, they have their reasons, even the citizens of the country, because the point is, it appears the position that they're presenting is that the junta, the intervention by the military is what their countries want. That is that's the picture that they are painting, because you could also see quite a lot of demonstrations and celebrations, as the case may be, on the streets of Niger,
Ambassador, my question,
Burkina Faso, and all of that.
Ambassador, it looks like you didn't get my question. My question is, if sanctions didn't work, what other measures or strategies can be used in stopping the spread of coup in West Africa?
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you very much. I think, you know, what is important is that leaders take responsibility. Political leaders must be seen to be doing exactly what is in their constitution. They must obey their constitution. That's number one. Number two is that leadership is about bringing democracy dividends to the people. So a situation where it looked like the leaders are not doing what they are expected to do. Because clearly, once a leader is accepted by the people, you will clearly see it in the way and manner, you know, the citizens of the country carry out their business. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the leaders within the continent and especially leaders within the region. So that once they begin to behave in the actual way, appropriate way, observing the constitution, having elections when elections should be, you know, holding elections when elections should hold, ensuring that power transits from one government to another, like we've done in Nigeria since 1999. So I think these are some of the pointers. Once we begin to see presidents that want to stay in power, amend the constitution and stay in power for as long as possible, this is where these issues begins to come into play. Secondly, again, is that there's also the complaint of external influence, because most of these countries from, you know, the Berlin Conference were, you know, split across quite a lot of European nations. It appears that there are major challenge with the ones that were colonized by France. So the issue is that there has to be a way that ECOWAS will work out a solution so that if these countries that were colonized by France are having issues, they expect their big brother or the regional father to come in and help them resolve those issues. I think that ECOWAS must open that channel where if countries under them, find a way, they need to find a way of expressing their challenges that they're having from countries that colonize them. Because what we are having right now is like, you have finished colonizing a country and then some of the policies and some of the structures you've put in place is still not allowing those countries to function as a sovereign and an independent state. So this is the challenge that I believe that the countries are worried about. And I believe that if ECOWAS begins to open doors for this kind of conversation, even at African Union level, I think that will help in reassuring the citizens that the junta is not even an option for them. What we are saying is that people are looking for temporary solutions. That's what they think, that's why some of them were celebrating that the junta is the best option. But with time, you will also begin to find out that it's not as easy as you thought. Some of the, rights and privileges will also begin to suffer as a result of the fact that there's junta in power. Because, how do you control the courts? How do you get your people to speak for you? When you don't have an established legislature, you don't have a judiciary that is working in accordance with the constitution, once the junta steps in, there is actually no constitution. They obviously govern by decrees. So these are the points that I see, but again, it has to start from leadership. The people that have been given the responsibility to lead must lead in such a manner that the people that they are leading will have faith within the system. As such, they won't begin to see this as, they won't begin to see, junta as an option for them, as opposed to democracy.
But also, on the other hand, do you agree with those who are saying ECOWAS needs to reinvent itself, especially when it comes to maintaining hardline positions? Yes,
I'm not certain that, reinventing of ECOWAS, it's a lot of English to speak, but how is the point? The ECOWAS have lasted for about 49 years. A lot of work needs to be done. At this point in time, challenges, within the sub-region, for example, I know that in the last 12 to 20 years, there has always been an attempt by ECOWAS to have a single currency. As we're 15 nations, but I think that we have about 10 or 9 different currencies that we use across the region. So there has to be, we should at this point in time be talking about unity. We should be talking about how we work together, how we ensure that we are economically stable as a region. So in terms of trying to get the leaders to find what works for the region, to work together, for the betterment of the citizens of the region, I think that's where the focus should be. In Africa as a whole, we're about 50-something countries and we have about almost 50-something currencies as well. Trading from one level to the other is a problem. In fact, traveling from one country to the other is a problem. I'm sure you know that if you want to fly to maybe countries like Burkina Faso, you might end up entering 2 or 3 flights before you get to the destination. And in some cases, you even fly out of a continent before you make your way back to the continent while trying to travel within the same region as well. So I believe that there's a lot that the region can do, to ensure that life is, that the citizens of the region are getting much better. There are regional bodies. If you go to South Africa, they have the SADC. If you go to the East African region, you have the East African Commission as well, the EAC. So I think that regionally there is a lot of work that needs to be done without a doubt. But I believe very much that it's the responsibility of the leaders within these regions to try and find a way of uniting them, because it is easier. I look forward to a time where we'll have about maximum of 4 currencies within the continent. As such, trade becomes easier. We've just introduced the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How is that going to happen if we are having ECOWAS there, we are having Alliance of Sahel, we are having EAC, we are having all these, bureaucracies and bottlenecks that are not, that cannot aid effective trade within the continent? We would have failed in our responsibility. The essence of AFTA is to ensure that it's Africa for Africa, is to ensure that countries, producers of goods from one African country can get take it to the next African countries without having much hassles. That's the essence. So a lot of work needs to be done, yes. ECOWAS will need to tighten their seatbelt and do more, the leaders, the same with other regions within the continent. And I believe that all of these are possible.
So still talking about ACTA, since you went there, what impact will this have on ACTA's goal of economic integration? Because for some, it is important that ECOWAS navigates through these issues effectively for the larger vision of a united and economically integrated Africa.
Well, I believe that the unity or the integration needs to be happening at the regional level, after which we can now begin to come together from the regions to see how we move clearly. From what I see, I think that the essence of, trying to bring, get all the countries to become signatories to AFTA is to ensure that we are trading more with ourselves, because it is clear that intra-African trade is what the continent requires. A lot of minerals that we mine in the continent find their way out of the continent. A lot of trade happens between China and Africa. A lot of trade happens between Russia and Africa. And we feel that once we begin to add value, both from country level to regional level, we can actually bring that, make that movement within the continent. And quite a lot of African countries are even taking their initiatives on their own without even dealing with it at the regional level. You know that Ghana, for example, has actually passed on a law that, you can travel to the country without visa. Rwanda did theirs about a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I believe that quite a lot of, some of these travel restrictions are some of the policies that, the member states within the continent and within the region, within the continent, first of all, must do to make it easier. Because at the regional level, they move around. With your ECOWAS passport, you can move to any country without having any problem. With your EAC passport, you can move within the East African region without any problem. The same with Southern African region. But I believe that there are, these restrictions that we must remove for us to have, a more prosperous Africa. Not just that, we also need to invest in infrastructure as well. We need to ensure that the continent is connected, is connected via infrastructure, because for all of the good things that technology can do for you, there is quite a lot that you have to do by yourself with infrastructure. You must do your roads. Right. We should have highways that are moving from Cairo down to Johannesburg. We should have highways that are moving from Lagos straight through Cameroon and then getting to Ethiopia and so on and so forth. We must have our hospitals in place. We must ensure that we have, flights can fly from one country within the continent to another without having to, take multiple days. I served in Burundi, for example. Between Nigeria and Burundi, you find out that you have, if you do a direct flight, it's about 4 hours flight. but I have to fly to Ethiopia, sleep in Ethiopia, and then the next morning I continue the journey. So it's actually 2 days journey going to Bujumbura and back. So for me to go to Bujumbura and come back, I would have spent 4 days. And these are the bottlenecks that we face in our businesses that I believe that AFTA has created a room for us to begin to find a way to resolve. But we can't even make this progressive. The regional bodies are not united and doing much better than they are doing at the moment. So a lot of work is cut out for African regional leaders. A lot of work is cut out for the African Union. But of course, there is the AU 2060 agenda, which also have all of these factors, which explains all of these factors and some of the steps that African leaders must take to be able to achieve that Vision 2060.
All right, thank you so much, Ambassador. I wish we had enough time to talk about what African leaders must do to deepen good governance in Nigeria, but sadly we're out of time. But basically from our conversation tonight, it's important that African leaders, ECOWAS, pursue its agenda of democracy and good governance effectively for the stability of the region. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've been speaking with Ambassador Elijah Oyengiagwa, is the former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi. Thank you so much for your perspective on our conversation tonight. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.